hello, and welcome to the Rationalist. Finally, yes! Or as my parents would probably call it, we want grandchildren. Why are you doing this to us? I'm your host, Rick Adams, and thank you so much for joining me. Now, I have a pretty good idea of why some of you may have turned to a show like The Rationalist. Perhaps you're a smart and capable adult looking for a voice of reason in a room full of chaos like this.
Now we need names, but for Hillary Clinton to destroy her candidacy, to destroy Hillary Clinton, you don't need names for Hillary Clinton's destruction.
Oh, Fox News, you silly fuckers, destroying America one scare tactic at a time. It's beautiful that you're killing all of us. But more than likely, The Rationalist was suggested to you because it has the words conspiracy and theory in the title, just like everything else you fucking watch on YouTube. But either way, you're here now. And I want to assure you smart folks that I've done my due diligence as a host. And to those out there who assume I'm just another sarcastic guy in a fantastic suit who's going to make you feel dumb for believing in silly nonsense, I say nay. Even though you are a fully formed adult and really should stop believing in such ridiculous things. Like Scientologists here in Hollywood who allow other adults to tell them they can't do simple, everyday things like watch YouTube videos or fuck doggy style, which seems crazy to me because really it's one of the best positions out there. And Catholics, I hear you snickering out there. And I honestly don't know what the hell you're laughing about because the things we do seem pretty nutty as well. For example, smearing burnt palm ash on your forehead then returning to work seems a little foolish now that I mentioned it, right? Plus, come on, pregnant virgins, water into Jägermeister? Truthfully, those all sound like the shitty, made-up lies men tell their spouses after she finds a suspicious receipt from a work trip you didn't tell her about. See, I'm just a friendly guy in an amazing suit that's gonna help us all see things a little more, well, rationally, I guess. So, to kick off this new program, we wanted to review some of the major conspiracy theories out there to see if we can share some of our rational thoughts on those difficult questions. And possibly debunk some of the tired old myths that are out there, but not by using scare tactics or hate like so many other Fox News but by simply relearning and restating the facts of history. But in order to do so, we all need to put our personal beliefs aside. And for most Americans, myself included, that's easier said than done. And look, I realize, and so should all of you, that not every major event that happens in the United States or abroad is a conspiracy, or a deep state operation, or a government psyop. Even though all the whiteys over at InfoWars would love us all to keep thinking that so they can sell more of their bullshit products. Please stop buying that shit, and maybe this guy will go fuck off. Now, when I say conspiracies, I mean a powerful group having a secret plan to do something unlawful or harmful. It happens more than we'd like to admit. And we're not talking about the entire government here, because people always say, oh, the government's so incompetent, they can never do blah, 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 blah. We're talking about a small group of specialized professionals who are all on a need-to-know basis. For example, the Gulf of Tonkin fuckery in 1964-1965, where the US Navy basically cried wolf on a second attack just to get the authority to fully invade Vietnam. Or what about Pearl Harbor's lack of communication to the admirals in Hawaii that could have helped prevent Japan's attack on the day that now lives in infamy? And I'm sure by now we've all seen the laughable footage of the moon landings, right? Like these, where the flag blows in the harsh vacuum of space. Which is fucking confusing because I wasn't aware of space even having wind. But that's great information to know. Because if we're all going to be space traveling soon like Elon Musk says, then remember to pack a light jacket for all those breezy days in space. But many Americans still believe that NASA sent men to the moon because it was on the TV when they were a child. Some citizens will even contend that while the moon landing footages may have been staged, America still sent men to the moon. And I honestly thought that same thing for the long time as well. Until it was determined that the moon rock Buzz Aldrin brought back from space was just a piece of petrified wood. So with that being said, let's really take a look at these moon landings. Now, gravity on the moon's surface is 1/6 Earth gravity, And according to NASA, an astronaut in full gear, including the 185-pound spacesuit, would only weigh approximately 62 pounds on the moon. 62 pounds! So when NASA simulated the moon's gravity, their calculations show astronauts having a slightly different ability when on the moon. Take a gander.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on.
Holy shit! That astronaut jumped up like 7 or 8 feet, which is exactly how it should have looked while on the moon. But we didn't see any of those amazing feats of athletic ability. We only got this unimpressive bullshit.
A little bit closer. Okay, here we go, a big one. Off the ground, about 4. There we go. Good.
That's fucking pathetic, even for America. If I produced the moon landings, I would have had that astronaut do a triple axel backflip as he stabbed the flagpole into the moon's surface while grabbing at his genitals, screaming, "America!" But he barely got off the ground, even with the wire harness attached. Also, that dust that kicked up, in 1/6 gravity, that would have hung around like a vapor, and some of those particles would still be going through space today. And lastly, what about this fun clip of Neil Armstrong and the gang faking their distance from Earth, even though they're supposedly close to landing on the moon, which is a 3-day ride?
An old reel received by mistake. It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr. and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance, in order to falsely demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. This is a segment that they believed wasn't even being recorded, much less suitable for broadcast, for the lens was being zoomed out and the scene was being changed to that of an interior of the astronauts at work. Here is the diffused work light that they used to see camera controls, but not throw light onto the spacecraft's wall. Here they remove part of the crescent insert. Finally, the iris is opened up to see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth out the window.
Boy, with that gentle British narration, we almost forget they're faking one of mankind's greatest achievements. And let me be absolutely clear here. No, the Earth is not flat. Sorry to break that to everyone. And yes, the International Space Station is real and orbiting the Earth. I just find it rather hard to believe that NASA sent men to the moon and back several times because of, well, science.
Before we can send astronauts into space on Orion, we have to test all of its systems. And there's only one way to know if we got it right. Fly it in space. For Orion's first flight, no astronauts will be aboard. We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth, 15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
What fucking technology could NASA possibly be missing? The rockets seem better than ever. They definitely have enough money. It just seems more and more obvious that a small group within the US government faked the moon landings to promote NASA's usefulness during the Cold War, and now we can't take back our lives because America will look like idiots. And we definitely can't have that. Now, with each one of those conspiracies, there are still so many unanswered questions that will probably never be answered in our lifetime. But having said that, I would still like to focus on another conspiracy, and that's the events of September 11th, 2001. As most of us were probably alive when 9/11 occurred. And I know, you may think, Rick, this was so long ago. We got Bin Laden. America won, bro. Well, I wish that were indeed the case, bro. Because America definitely didn't win shit. Also, real quick, to all the angry debunkers out there, before you go upstairs and ask your mom to cook up more bagel bites while you think of hateful comments to write from your office, which honestly is just an old computer room in your parents' basement that you now masturbate in, but before you go through all that trouble, just be aware that nobody here at the Rationalist will be reading those dumb, stupid, idiotic, and most likely hate-filled comments you'll post after watching this episode. So, we just thought, fair warning before you go and waste all your hateful energy on us. Save that shit for your Facebook comments. Now, when our researchers and I started to investigate all the evidence surrounding 9/11, the first basic question we couldn't answer right off the bat was, there was 19 supposed hijackers at several different airports on the morning of 9/11. But why is there no clear footage of all 19 men besides this edited clip?
Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows your name.
Now, I say edited clip because the date and timestamp typically found on security footage had been removed by the FBI, which is automatically suspicious and gives conspiracy theorists a huge reason to doubt the facts. Because even some analysts have questioned the authenticity of that recording, as closed-circuit security cameras record it 1 frame per second, and this video appears to be a 30 frame per second consumer video. But even ignoring the fact that the tape has been edited and it's a wrong frame rate, there should be miles of security footage from every conceivable angle of all 19 of these men, with the correct date and time, checking their luggage, waiting around the gate for their flight, even boarding the planes. But the FBI has confiscated almost all footage from the events of 9/11 and has only released a few edited clips that all seem highly suspicious. The next troubling piece we found was this chilling phone call made by flight attendant C.C. Lyles, who was on board hijacked flight 93. Take a listen.
We also have the dramatic message left by flight attendant C.C. Lyles in her husband's answering machine before briefly talking to him on her cell phone. As she herself is suggesting, we should listen very carefully.
Tuesday, 9:47 a.m.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that.
We too can notice the absence of the typical background noise heard inside a plane.
I don't know what to say. There's 3 guys. They've hijacked the plane. I'm trying to be calm.
After saying goodbye, she seems to fumble with the headset while she whispers a few more words into the mouthpiece.
I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
End of message.
Even by playing the segment several times, it remains difficult to hear anything different from the words, "It's a frame."
Wow, that call is frightening. And just like the voiceover from every Viagra commercial explained, there is a noticeable lack of any plane noise in the background. But that's exactly how modern airphones work. Yet conspiracy theorists will use that lack of knowledge to have you believe otherwise, like this.
The CIA has been developing plans for covert operations that involve the in-flight swapping of commercial airliners with military drones since the 1960s. One such plan was called Operation Northwoods, and it detailed how to replace a civil airliner with a military drone in mid-air, unbeknownst to the air traffic controllers. After the swap, the airliner would be landed in a military base. The drone would continue to fly, appearing on radar as the original plane, and would be remotely guided all the way into the target.
Holy shit, that is terrifying. And while Operation Northwood seems like a probable tactic for 9/11, the New York Medical Examiner's Office has identified passengers and crew using DNA found in bone fragments from the rooftop of the old Deutsche Bank building that was next to the towers during 9/11, suggesting the original planes more than likely crashed into the towers. There's also an interesting documentary on Netflix about those DNA findings called The Last Secrets of 9/11 that you should check out. But I will say this, the facts surrounding the original planes and if they actually crashed at all 4 sites on 9/11 are certainly unclear. Listen to one ex-CIA member explain to Vice News about the death of suspected Al-Qaeda terrorist Mohammed Atta.
John, can you talk me through what was happening in Pakistan in 2001 and 2002?
Sure. I was working from headquarters on September 11th, and my God, I wanted to avenge, like everybody, I wanted to avenge the 9/11 attacks. So I volunteered to go overseas. We got word from Washington that Abu Zubaydah was somewhere in Pakistan, and our job was to catch him. At the time, we thought that Abu Zubaydah was a major Al-Qaeda figure. It turned out he was not. He was never an actual member of Al-Qaeda. He had never pledged fealty to Osama bin Laden. But he was the commander of the 2 training camps. And we hadn't captured any major Al-Qaeda leaders. We had only killed one. We had killed Mohammed Atta in a bombing in Tora Bora.
What the fuck, CIA dude? Mohammed Atta was supposedly killed when he crashed Flight 11 into Tower 1. So how could he be re-killed in a bombing in Tora Bora years later? That piece of information is very alarming, as is this. The Project for the New American Century, which was a DC think tank started in 1997, including these palefaces, which produced a report, and in Chapter 5 of that report, titled Creating Tomorrow's Dominant Force, they wrote, "The process of transformation, meaning the transformation into a global dominant force, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event such as a new Pearl Harbor." And if you'll remember, Pearl Harbor, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, is what fully launched America into World War II, and it seems, based on the evidence, that's exactly what happened on 9/11. A powerful group within the US government concocted a false flag operation to blow up a few buildings, killing innocent people, which got America angry and scared. Then the government blamed it on exactly who they wanted without evidence or due process or even serving a warrant, which is a huge fucking deal. Then the government used their newly appointed authority to invade the Middle East, and now 17 years later it's still going on, taking the crown for the longest and most expensive war in American history. And you know, it's kind of funny, but it's really, really not, because this all sounds exactly like what Hitler did back in 1933, where Hitler hilariously blamed the burning down of the Reichstag building in Germany on communists as a whole group. You know, like the Bush administration did with Muslims after 9/11. And even though the Germany fire was admittedly done by one man who confessed and was found guilty in court and then beheaded for the crime, Hitler, being the funny guy he was, still went ahead and urged the president of Germany to issue a suspension of civil liberties called the Reichstag Fire Decree. And this all sounds eerily similar to the Patriot Act, which the Bush administration passed in the wake of 9/11. So I'm pretty sure that this is exactly why scholars say to know your history or you're doomed to repeat it. And sure, by now my friends and family are growing more and more concerned as they think I've totally lost my fucking mind. While others are like, Rick, what the hell are you talking about? Terrorists, dude. It was terrorists, remember? Yeah, I don't think so. You mean those global terrorists like Al-Qaeda and now ISIS, right? Who, and this is important, don't even have fucking helicopters to get around locally in their areas. Those same global terrorists who make crude bombs in the back of vehicles that look like they were taken right from the popular television series The A-Team? Because let's not forget, in 1993, terrorists actually tried to blow up the World Trade Centers using their best laid plans of, once again, a crudely made bomb in the back of a van. Even in this picture from the 1993 bombing, we can clearly see the columns still standing, even though the bomb was detonated right next to them. It destroyed all these cars and blasted a huge fucking crater in the concrete, but those columns still stood. So still believe the Twin Towers were brought down by structural fires? Let that really sink in, because 9/11 was no small feat. To make it happen, you would undoubtedly need some help within the US government to pull it off. Seriously, if a commercial airliner makes one false move in the sky, in under 10 minutes, 2 fighter jets are scrambled to it, and that's by the Air Force's own admission. And we're meant to believe this unsophisticated group, who typically uses crudely made suicide vests and bombs in buckets and bags or vehicles, was able to hijack not 1, but 4 commercial airliners at the same time? Stop! Stop it! And of course, the 9/11 Commission blamed that huge blunder on the Air Force and NORAD's incompetence, arguing they didn't know the locations of the hijacked flights to scramble jets to, which is just a flat-out lie. Because, whoops, all the conversations between air traffic controllers and NORAD are recorded every single day. And those recordings, unfortunately, tell a different story on 9/11.
Well, that's right. This is the story of what happened that day in the air. Danielle was in the Dulles Airport control tower that day outside Washington. When we talked with her back then, Danielle recalled it as just a normal radio transmission.
And then I asked American 77 to contact the next controller.
20 minutes later, as the hijacked planes began their deadly, coordinated missions, it was air traffic controllers around the country who were the first to realize it.
I just dropped 800 feet in like one sweep. That's another situation.
It was United Flight 175 hitting the South Tower. Then the drama shifted to Washington as the flight Danielle had handled, American 77, disappeared from radar and then headed back into the Capitol.
Okay, he's 12 miles west. He's moving very fast, eastbound. Okay, guys, where is he now? 11 miles west. And it was just a countdown, and it went 6, 5, 4. And I had it in my mouth to say 3, and all of a sudden, the plane turned away. And we sat back in our chairs and breathed for just a second, and the plane turned back. And we're telling the supervisor he's turning back in. He's turning back eastbound.
Fuck! It just looks like everybody stood around and watched as this horror unfolded. Now, I can tell some of you are still not convinced a powerful group within the US government had their greedy little hands involved with 9/11. So, let's talk about the actual buildings. Not just the Twin Towers and Building 7, but the Pentagon as well. And before we move forward, let's do a quick history of the towers themselves. In 1992, the New York Port Authority, who owned the World Trade Center buildings at the time, decided to sue their insurance companies to pay for the nearly $1 billion asbestos removal that was needed in order to get the towers up to code. That's also why so many first responders are developing different kinds of cancers now. Think about that for a moment. The Twin Towers were filled with asbestos that needed to be removed to the tune of almost $1 billion. Shit, if that were the case, wouldn't it just be easier to demolish the towers and then rebuild using taxpayer money? Oh, I'm sorry, too soon? So fast forward 10 years to 2001. A New Jersey court finally decides that the insurers of the World Trade Center buildings were not on the hook for the extremely expensive asbestos removal. But during this 10-year lawsuit, the New York Port Authority intelligently put their 99-year lease for the towers up for sale, and in February of 2001, Fernando Realty won the property with a bid of $3.25 billion, only to back out of the deal a few months later. Enter Larry Silverstein. This cigarette and a tie's winning bid of $3.22 billion won out, and a deal was signed at the end of July 2001. Basically, Mr. Silverstein invested almost $3.25 billion into buildings that seemed to be at the time a huge financial liability, which is odd because real estate moguls typically aren't in the business to lose money, especially not billions of dollars. But I digress. Now, let me preface this next segment by saying I'm not a structural engineer, nor am I an explosives expert. But I'm also not a complete fucking asshole. I know a controlled demolition when I see one, as I'm sure you smart folks do as well.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me. No one can go in to get the people out. There's small explosions still going on.
Where'd you get close there, buddy?
Yeah. Did we just heard another explosion?
Then the second building collapsed. Came back 4 minutes later, looking like a Three Stooges movie covered in plastic. I swear to God. What do you got with you, man? That's a good shit. Then we went back there.
Whoa, 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 whoa!
But the National Institute for Standards and Technology, or NIST, claims structural fires and a loose column brought these extremely well-built buildings down. But here's an image of the London apartment fire in which all 24 floors of this building burned for well over a day with no global collapse. And I know all the debunkers around are like, yeah, sure. Well, asshats, I highly doubt that apartment building was built anywhere near the strength of the Twin Towers. Even the designer of the towers stated they calculated it could withstand multiple impacts.
Well, 13,000 tons is a lot of force. People always talk about an airplane crashing into a building. And in 1944 or 45, a plane did crash into the Empire State Building. But the largest aircraft flying today, at least commercially, the 747, fully loaded, is on the order of 300 tons. So if you think about a 300-ton element crashing into a building that's been designed to carry 13,000 tons, you can see that an aircraft crashing into the World Trade Center would probably not do anything to the major building. It could affect localized structural elements, could knock out a column, and there could be some damage. But as far as a plane knocking a building over of that type, that would not.
Also, a quick side note here. When a building collapses, it doesn't automatically turn into pulverized concrete, and all the desks, filing cabinets, and people living or working there just don't magically disappear into bone fragments and molten iron, as you'll see in this pretty disturbing clip.
The concrete floors, the furniture, the computers, and the file cabinets weren't the only things missing after the collapses. The Twin Towers were also filled with people. Building collapses, the victims tend to remain trapped between the pancaking floors. They may be crushed and mangled, but in most cases they remain in one piece. In fact, on the morning of September 11, local hospitals prepared to receive hundreds of victims they expected to be extracted from the rubble. Practically no one arrived. According to the chief medical examiner, 2,749 victims died in the Twin Towers, but fewer than 300 whole bodies were recovered. Nearly 20,000 pieces of bodies were found in the ruins, more than 6,000 small enough to fit in 5-inch test tubes. 200 different pieces were matched to a single person. 1,630 victims were eventually identified, 800 of which by DNA alone. This means that for 800 victims, there were no body parts large enough to be recognizable. The remaining 1,119 victims were never identified. This means that for more than 40% of the victims, not even a fragment large enough to recover DNA was found. This map by the New York Fire Department shows the locations around the towers where human remains were found. Yellow circles are body parts from civilians. Red triangles are from firefighters. The very distance at which some of the body parts were found remains inexplicable, with a simple gravitational collapse.
Man, that is chilling. And if there were no explosives used, then how do over 1,100 people just disappear. And let's not forget, it took well over 100 days to put the fires out at Ground Zero. Over 4 months to put out a fire. But no explosives or chemical accelerants were ever tested for by NIST, because why the fuck would they?
We were in the lobby gathering to go up and start doing a search on the upper floors. As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion. Huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us.
Tower 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse.
I was making my way to the foot of the World Trade Center. Suddenly, while talking to an officer who was questioning me about my press credentials, we heard a very loud blast, an explosion.
To me, it sounded like an explosion. Then the building, the rolling sound sounded like the building collapsed.
Where the FBI is here, as you can see, they had roped this area off. They were taking photographs and securing this area just prior to that huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
It just went ba-boom. It was like a bomb went off, and it was like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then when we finally got to the bottom, they were coming out on a mezzanine level there, and another explosion came right from it, just everyone flying.
Then, I don't know, an hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much, much lower.
What happened, man? Big boom. Come down the steps, everything fine till we got to the basement, and then everything just fell in.
What happened?
We was in an explosion. We was in the lobby and the third explosion, the whole lobby collapsed on us.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
That was the
planet probably?
Yeah, definitely secondary explosion. We was inside waiting to go upstairs, and on our way upstairs, the whole fucking plane blew. It was like 3 explosions after that. We came in after the fire. We came when the fire was going on already. We was in the staging area inside the building, waiting to go upstairs. And it exploded. The whole lobby collapsed on the lobby inside.
Explain to me the moment of impact.
Well, me and Mr. Hess, the corporation counsel, were on the 23rd floor. I told him we got to get out of here. We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Flew us back into the 8th floor.
Yeah, here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
You gotta get back from here.
You know that. You gotta get back. All right? Don't worry about me. We need to make calls right now.
And like I said, you don't have to listen to me because I'm not an explosives expert. So I'll let Tom Sullivan explain, who is an explosives expert and apparently a big fan of the movie V for Vendetta. Take a look.
My name's Tom Sullivan. I worked for Controlled Demolition Incorporated, CDI, the top-rated explosives demolition firm in the world. There are many steps that you need to take. First off is you have to weaken the building. The firewalls have to be removed, the elevator shafts have to be cut, and the rails cut, as well as the cars themselves removed. And then you have to move to the support columns on the particular load floors, and those are cut by a torch for 2 reasons. First, to weaken them, and also to allow for charges to be placed onto the structure or onto the columns themselves. I knew from day one that this was a controlled event, and why I did that is because simply looking at Building 7, you have a sudden collapse of the building. It's fairly symmetrical as it comes down. There's the classic kink, which means that the center core fails first, and you can see that on the video. And the building falls near free fall. So I really honestly didn't believe this from day one. The story that just a few columns can cause a synchronized global collapse, an implosion, is, well, that's just nonsense.
V is right. It really is nonsense. Plus, there's this nonsense as well.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
What emphysema in a suit is trying to explain here is that the New York Fire Marshal made the determination on 9/11 that Building 7 needed to be demolished. And that's all well and good. The Fire Marshal says the building is unsafe and must come down. Agreed. But in what physical world would the New York Fire Department be able to cut, load, and execute everything Mr. Sullivan just said would need to happen in order to bring these buildings down successfully in really just a few hours. Seriously, the traffic alone in New York City on that day would have made it impossible to get all the explosive materials needed down to that site. Plus, come on, where are you getting all the explosive material on such short notice? Let me guess, you got a guy, eh? Seriously, it seems pretty implausible any of this was actually executed on the day of September 11th, 2001. So that only leaves two options. Either A, the buildings were preloaded with explosives prior to 9/11, yes, or B, the New York Fire Department set a Guinness World Record for the fastest loading of explosives into a 47-story building and detonated with precision accuracy in the middle of downtown Manhattan during the worst emergency in recorded history. I don't fucking think so. Even with that pile of irrefutable evidence, there are still many people that will deny the building collapses even look like controlled demolitions. And sure, if your head is so far up your fucking ass that you can't see, then we can disagree on whether the building collapses were a controlled demolition or not. But the collapses certainly look like a controlled demolition, as Mr. Joe Rogan tries to explain to an angry debunker.
Rejoice, ladies and gentlemen. Brian Dunning. Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming on. I read about you, and I read some of the things, and I didn't know when you had contacted me that you had included me in your, how many celebrities were there, 8 or 10?
It was the top 10 most wanted celebrities promoting harmful pseudoscience.
And in that, I read about myself, and I was shocked to learn that I believe that 911 was created by the government.
I don't think you've ever said that.
I've never said that. The only thing I've ever said that's controversial at all is that Tower 7, when you watch it fall, it looks like a controlled demolition. And I don't think that's controversial because it looks like a controlled demolition.
Yeah, when you look at just the top half of it, it does.
Well, you look at the whole thing, the way the structure collapses.
There's no video of the whole thing. You can only see the video of the top, really the top quarter of it as it disappears behind the building.
It's not really, I wouldn't say it's the top quarter. It's a 48-floor building, correct?
I don't know. I'm not going to argue the fraction, but you don't see the bottom of it.
Well, that's true, but it is very unusual how it falls into its base instead of falls over.
It didn't. It fell. It started to fall down straight, but then it almost destroyed 2 other buildings that it fell against.
Watch it again. Here, look at that. Yeah, that's way more than the top quarter.
Okay, it's not. It's not. You don't see the bottom.
That's almost the entire building.
No, it's not.
Okay, let's see it again. Let's see it again because we
foreground.
caught that in the middle. Let's see it again.
See much
right, but I think it's a bit disingenuous to say that that thing doesn't fall into its base. Look at that.
It doesn't. I mean, look, it's
man.
already going at an angle. Look at that. Look at that.
Okay, but it all fell to the bottom. I mean, let's look at that one again.
It's not going to fall to the top.
Okay, but you're being kind of silly. That thing collapsed into its base. This had never happened before, and it looks like a controlled demolition. I'm not saying it, but let me be clarified, because this is important. I'm not saying it's a controlled demolition.
I know.
I have no idea, but that's what it looks like. To say it doesn't look like that is kind of silly.
No, okay, so I think you were number 8 on my list of top 10 celebrities who promote harmful pseudoscience. And here's the paragraph that I wrote on you. Number 8, Joe Rogan. Comedian Joe Rogan does what he can to promote virtually any conspiracy theory that he stumbles onto, apparently accepting them all uncritically with a wholesale embrace. Now, I know you would disagree with that now.
Of course I would.
and I want to give you that chance, so let me continue. The worst part is that he promotes these ideas to the public at every interview opportunity, but gives himself the intellectual get-out-of-jail-free card of not needing any evidence by hiding behind the childish debate technique of saying, hey, I'm just the guy asking questions. God, this makes me sound like an asshole.
Because you are an asshole. The Building 7 video especially looks like a controlled demolition. They all do.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it.
Asshole! So moving on to the Pentagon, you probably don't remember the government story on 9/11 that unexperienced pilot Hani Hanjour, who according to his flight instructors, not only couldn't fly a single-engine Cessna plane like this one, but the instructors also said they never suspected Mr. Hanjour was a hijacker because his skills were so weak that he would pose a safety hazard if he flew a commercial airliner. And this is the guy with shitty piloting skills was able to pull off a highly advanced maneuver to bring a Boeing 757 into the side of the Pentagon with pinpoint accuracy? Whoa, stop, thank you. This is infamous frame 23 of the footage the Pentagon initially released. Experts will have you believe this entering the frame is the tip of American Airlines Flight 77. But this is what the tip of a Boeing 757 actually looks like. The projectile flying towards the Pentagon and leaving a trail of white smoke behind it looks awfully similar to this. A U.S. ballistic missile. And here's the smoke trail left behind on 9/11, which, by the way, planes don't leave smoke trails. And here's the picture of a missile smoke trail, just for comparison. Now, I don't mean to be a Honduras hater, but it seems highly improbable that shitty pilot could get a plane to hit the side of the Pentagon, especially without slamming into the ground first. Because look at this picture from the Pentagon explosion. You're telling me Mr. Honduras, with his shitty piloting skills, was able to avoid hitting not only the ground, but all this other shit around the area, and still hit directly into the wall? And also, you're telling me that this camera right here, looking directly at what exploded, didn't capture what happened? The whole story is bullshit. And there still remains one unanswered question. Where is the fucking plane? I'm sorry, folks, but it's a Boeing 757 airliner. It would take up this entire lawn section. And you're telling us all 85 cameras the FBI said might have caught what happened didn't capture a single frame of the 155-foot plane? Fuck you! Hey, but it worked, right? Even today, many Americans believe the official narrative and all of NIST lies, myself included. That wasn't until I started to see first responders, police, firefighters, airline pilots, structural engineers, explosives experts, university professors, and scholars ask simple questions about 9/11, and the answers were these crazy, off-the-wall tales that didn't actually happen. For example, NIST Building 7 collapse model, shown here, which, by the way, NIST won't release any of their data to the scientific community so they could replicate and prove or disprove NIST findings because, yeah, that's typically how science works. Even former NIST scientist Peter Ketchum discovered the organization where he had worked for over 14 years deliberately suppressed the truth about 9/11.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th.
My name is Peter Michael Ketchum. I've spent much of my life in the high performance and scientific computing world. I worked at NIST for 14 years, starting in 1997. NIST's role, as I understand it, was to investigate the collapses of the 3 World Trade Center towers. I was not involved in those investigations or writing those reports, but I was certainly aware that that research study was going on. It actually came up in a conversation with a friend that I'd known for 30 years. And she mentioned something along the lines of, gee, do you realize there is some growing evidence that the official 9/11 narrative may not be quite what we all thought it was? I think I just let it sink in. But in the middle of August, I felt very compelled to start investigating. And in a very short amount of time, it became clear to me that NIST's investigation of the collapse of the World Trade Centers was not a sincere and genuine study. First, I was furious with myself. I couldn't believe that I had not noticed this before. How could I have not noticed this for the last 15 years? That the most likely cause, controlled demolition, was not investigated at all. In fact, it was dismissed in 1 or 2 sentences within the report.
Dit is controlled demolition. Zeker weten. Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen.
What is special about Building 7, and I think why it has gotten as much attention as it has, is because it wasn't hit by a plane. So that cannot be used as a reason for why the building collapsed. Now, it did have some fires. They weren't terribly notable fires. They were rather modest, in my opinion. And to complicate matters even more, there was an obvious foreknowledge.
Building is about to blow up. Moving back.
The point is, that building is heavily built. There would be no reason to expect it to come down. I believe there is a quote at one point that the NIST investigators said something along the lines, they were having trouble getting a handle on why Building 7 had collapsed. NIST is extremely competent. So to have NIST be baffled by the collapse of a building that had only modest fires and exhibits every characteristic of controlled demolition. If they say they were coming up empty-handed and couldn't figure it out, that's not believable. Watch some of the videos of the collapses. Look for several things. Look for sudden onset. When the collapses start, they happen very fast and they complete within 10, 11, 12 seconds. Second, look at the symmetry. These buildings come straight down, or almost straight down. Third, look at the rubble that is left. It is not big pieces of steel, big chunks of cement. It is fine particles. And they might also look at those videos to see the explosive nature of those collapses. You can see essentially a wave of explosive demolition traveling down the building as it collapses. Explosions coming out of windows. Huge chunks of steel perimeter beams flying hundreds of feet off to the side. Steel does not fly off to the side hundreds of feet due to gravity. Gravity works vertically, not laterally. There has to be a force there, pushing it to the side. Once I took a look at it, it leapt out at me. This was not a case of some subtle differences or subtle discrepancies or differences of scientific opinion that needed further investigation. This was glaring, clear cut.
Getting behind the car. Damn, that information is hard to ignore. But even without NIST bullshit data, we can clearly see for ourselves that the Building 7 collapse looks nothing like their model. The model shows all this falling at the top, which seems correct because all the windows smash out below, but then the model shows the building twist in as it collapses down upon itself. But that's not actually what happened in the physical world we occupy. The building doesn't twist at all. It falls straight down like a curtain dropping near free fall speeds. Now, of course, it would only make logical sense that after 9/11, the National Institute for Standards and Technology would update high-rise building protocols to avoid global collapses in the future, right? No such changes have ever been made. We don't fucking need them. Which leads me to believe that NIST learned nothing from their investigation, which is absurd because all the events surrounding 9/11 are unprecedented. None of these things ever happened before in structural engineering or in science, but everything was cleaned up so fucking fast as if NIST and FEMA already had the answers they needed.
Mr. Crowley of New York.
I have a number of questions. One, can any one of you gentlemen tell me who was in charge of amassing the steel and other debris as a result from the attack of September 11th on the World Trade Center?
FEMA commissioned the building performance assessment team, and it was that team led by Dr. Corley.
Did they determine which debris would be sold off as scrap?
No, we did not determine that. That was determined, I understand, by the City of New York.
In other words, the city was selling or was disposing of material within 2 weeks of the actual event, or was it prior to that?
It may have been prior to that.
Were you disturbed to find out that the city was actually disposing of or selling off?
We had
material?
previously indicated that we definitely wanted to see the steel and select
Did
quantities
you
of
or
it.
did FEMA or any other entity actually ask or tell the city of New York to cease and desist from disposing of that material?
I don't have any knowledge that anyone had the authority even to ask them to cease and desist.
So no one even asked them politely to stop selling, but in all likelihood could be evidence. But I do believe that conspiracy theorists are going to have a field day with this. And that's unfortunate, not only for the members of Congress who are trying to work on this issue, but for all the families out there that are listening very carefully to what we're talking about today, what these experts are saying. And I just think there's so much that has been lost in these last 6 months that we can never go back and retrieve. And it's not only unfortunate, it's borderline criminal. Yeah. And I'll yield back with that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Crowley.
Biff is right. It is criminal. A Class E felony, to be exact. The act in which a person, law enforcement, governmental, or regulatory authority alters, conceals, falsifies, or destroys evidence with the intent to interfere with an investigation. That's exactly what happened to all the evidence of 9/11. And look, I know the implications of what I'm saying here on The Rationalist. And if the Illuminati is watching, and trust me, they're always watching, count me in, guys! Seriously, I'll do what it takes. I'll cut my left ring finger and bathe in a pool filled with Big Mac's secret sauce or whatever. Just let me in on the secrets so I can stop thinking about this shit and maybe get some sleep at night. But all joking aside, yes, I firmly believe a powerful group within the US government who had the ability and resources helped plan and orchestrate the false flags attacks on September 11, 2001. And these false flag attacks are nothing new. Throughout history, they have been used steadily to invade and overthrow governments for land and resources. We forget America was started by using these attacks from the scary-ass individuals who formed rebel forces against the British. Remember, these were 13 British colonies that were overtaken by colonial militia forces that were considered to be traitors and terrorists to the crown at the time. And I know, as an American, that information stings a little. But this is going to hurt, because technically, the infamous Boston Tea Party is actually considered a false flag operation like 9/11. Because the Bostonian rebels who participated in the tea's destruction in 1773 disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians to force the blame on the Indian tribes. Which is honestly kind of a dick move, but hey, that's America for you, right? Because the Bush administration did the same thing with Muslims, even though the 19 so-called terrorists were mostly Saudi men. Now, the false flag operation conducted on 9/11 was not only to invade the Middle East for oil, but also to keep America's war economy going. When was the last time America was not in a conflict in over the last 50 years, say? Think about that for a minute while our military budget expands indefinitely. Oh, and America also needed cheaper opium, right? Opium? Anybody? Seriously, is it no coincidence to anyone else that opium production in Afghanistan skyrocketed from 2001 all the way up until yesterday, including today, and the United States is in the grips of the largest opioid epidemic in recorded history? Even when we deliberately put heroin in cough syrup for kids, we didn't have this many people addicted. And I know some smart-ass economists over at the Washington Post, which, by the way, is now owned by the Amazon guy and seems like a huge conflict of interest for a billionaire to own a prominent newspaper in Washington, D.C., but what the fuck do I know about corruption? But they'll say, Rick, Afghanistan's opium production is just supply meeting demand. And why I highly disagree with that statement, it's still rather suspicious that where America's global police force is deployed, the production and smuggling of the world's most addicting substance increased dramatically, with percentages like 87% growth. 87%! That doesn't make any sense unless you realize what is actually happening. And I'll let one of my favorite secret agents explain exactly who I'm referring to.
Lana, everything the CIA does within the borders of the United States is illegal, especially Project MK Ultra.
Wait, MK Ultra? That was the CIA's mind control program, right?
Yeah, it's since been
discredited, but...
Discredited for being batshit crazy.
It wasn't...
And for being in direct violation of the Nuremberg Code, which was written because of medical experiments by Nazi war criminals, many of whom, after World War II, spoiler alert, came to work for the CIA goddamn A.
Wait, what? Look, the Soviets were kicking our ass in the Cold War. Our scientists had to think outside the box.
Oh, is that the box where they kept informed consent? Because I'm pretty sure that all those mental patients the CIA force-fed LSD didn't give it.
Wait, what?
Mental patients, Lana. They gave them LSD every day for 6 months.
Not 6 months. The longest one was only 174 days.
That is 6 months.
Oh, and what about Project Artichoke before Ultra, where you dickbags got innocent people addicted to morphine?
Look, all that crazy drug stuff was intentionally, secretly leaked to divert attention from the real goal of Project MK Ultra, which was mind control through hypnosis and torture.
Is that supposed to make it better?
It's not supposed to make it anything. Take a ride on Sunset.
First, everything said in that clip is 100% factually accurate, even though it's in a cartoon. And yes, it's no secret that the CIA is one of the sketchiest groups on the planet that has tortured captives and drugged unsuspecting scientists and citizens alike. Netflix has a great docu-series called Wormwood about one particular CIA scientist, Frank Olson, who the government drugged with LSD and subsequently killed when he obviously freaked the fuck out, and how his son put all the pieces together over decades of lies and misinformation from our government, only to find out that the CIA, spoiler alert, killed his father because he wanted out, but the government needed to keep all those dirty secrets in. Now, the CIA has been caught smuggling everything from guns to drugs to even Nazis. And yes, I did say Nazis. Operation Paperclip was a CIA covert operation that brought around 1,600 Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians back to the United States after World War II, and I assume pardoned them for their war crimes because the government had them join a little scientific team called NASA. Now, the Central Intelligence Agency seems to be untouchable by the law because even when concrete evidence of highly illegal activities by the CIA is brought straight to the director's attention on live TV, the CIA still somehow refuses to accept the evidence. Watch the magic.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time. I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country. I have been trying to get this out for 18 years, and I have the evidence.
If you have information about CIA illegal activity in drugs, you should immediately bring that information to wherever you want, but let me suggest 3 places. The Los Angeles Police Department.
So now that I've secured my grisly murder by the CIA, I'll say this. I only remind us of these governmental conspiracies and historical facts because we need to break the myth that America is this nation that's always the good guy fighting evil. Seriously, every American tale throughout history has been sensationalized and distorted to misrepresent the facts. From the midnight ride of Paul Revere to the truth about terror bombing Japan during World War II, and now the events surrounding 9/11. Because ever since Trump won the presidency and all this talk of Oprah or The Rock running in 2020, we should feel compelled to remind ourselves daily that these are the most powerful positions known to man, and we're handing them over all willy-nilly to people we saw on TV a few times. And look, I understand some of the facts I presented here on The Rationalist is a hard pill to swallow. But so much fuckery has gone on throughout the years that we need full transparency no matter how difficult the truth. We also need to change how the news and important information is being delivered. An information evolution. Truthful information that's not backed by big business or political party agendas. Because we can no longer let governments, ours, Russia's, or China's, or whoever, nor are powerful media companies like Fox or CNN or even Facebook to misrepresent facts that change our perception. And even worse, change the culture of the United States, because that has happened. As citizens of the United States, we no longer have the power to make informed decisions about our future because we can't get a straight fucking answer anymore. Everything is this pre-scripted bullshit. Even those fake-ass sincere apologies either at a press conference or through Twitter, it's fucking embarrassing that we allow this shit to go on. That's why we need truth tellers like NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden and now the survivors of the Parkland shooting in Florida to be rewarded, not exiled or mocked on national television, because those are the tactics the media uses to divide us and scare us into not sharing truthful information. And trust me, they'll do worse. Like recently deceased journalist Michael Hastings, who was killed off in a highly suspicious manner here in LA for a Rolling Stones article about a US general that was unflattering. But it was the fucking truth. So, if this is the behavior of the government and our powerful media outlets now, that when a secret of theirs is revealed or when a strong stand is made for a well-needed change that might affect their advertising or campaign dollars, that the disclosing party is considered an enemy, that's only a few very short steps away from a full-on dictatorship where the first rule of success is the suppression of factual information. We need to start thinking rationally. Our country is smarter than this. We need to be more vigilant as citizens and scrutinize the things we see on the news and the internet. Check source material. Do your own research outside of YouTube or Fox News. We need to speak and listen to diverse groups of people to learn something new about other cultures, and that goes for everybody. Otherwise, as we've seen already, ignorance only leads to exactly where we are today. Mass confusion, racism born out of stupidity, crazy conspiracy theories mixed with hate, and even worse, US citizens being tricked to hand over the keys to our powerful nation to an unqualified, cheap, racist buffoon like Donald Trump. It's time for this information evolution to begin, because knowledge is the ultimate power. And hopefully, we can learn from each other in order to make the leap from this current, confused, and divided America to finally becoming the United States of America that we've only heard and dreamt about. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to share this information if you like. We also have more Rationalist episodes to come, so be sure to like and follow or subscribe and all that good shit. But until next time, my friends, please stay rational.